Okay, now on the Q&A, folks, we are very limited in time, so it has to be a question, not an explanation or a story or, you know, your viewpoint. I'm sorry, I wish we had more time, but if you could just pose your question. I'm going to stand up here in the middle aisle, and you can line up down the center aisle there, and if you want to address it to a certain speaker, that's fine. Otherwise, you folks can choose one person to answer the question, and obviously the answer should be fairly brief if they should be, okay?
Okay. My name is Marjorie Laughlin. This question is towards Katrina. Katrina, on the Senate Bill 1100 and also the House Bill 1950, both of them contained the Model City Ordinance until the 1100 was slightly changed, but it still has basically the same thing in it. And that, from what I understand, takes the zoning authority away from local municipalities and turns it over to people in the state government. And because Corbett and quite a few other people at the state have received so much money from the gas industry, they cannot afford to go against what the gas industry really wants without being in danger. Okay, they permit the gas industry to decide where the compression stations are going to go, where the pipelines are going to go. How is this going to work in favor of the citizens?
So as an update to the legislation that just got passed, it was changed a little. So very true to what this lady was saying is that there was zoning ordinances. The Commonwealth Foundation did not take a official position, though we do disagree with the industry on several things, including forced pooling. The Commonwealth Foundation has taken a position against, which the drilling industry supports. With the zoning ordinances, the reason that became an issue in the legislature is because zoning was being used to essentially prevent drilling from happening. So you had some local communities who were taking setbacks and making them essentially 7 football fields in length. So basically creating bubbles where people couldn't drill, and that's why it became an issue. There is an issue of them not letting local authorities do what they want or what they should be doing, which is zoning. So it's a balance that should be met in between there. The legislation got changed to where they can't force a compression station to be within a local community. Local communities have a say within the DEP permitting process. The goal should have been to make sure that local communities couldn't target the drilling industry and prevent drilling from happening, but it shouldn't be the other way too, where they single out the industry to give them special treatment.
Hi, I'm Bill Redding. I have one question, and that is, from what you folks have been saying, none of the gas that's going to come from Pennsylvania or other gas areas in the United States is going to leave these borders. Is that correct?
No, I don't.
So you're going to be shipping our gas to China or wherever.
I don't think anyone said that. What we have, what I know Thomas said, and I've said, and what's true, Pennsylvania has now become an exporter of gas. We produce all we need in Pennsylvania, so the excess has to be sold somewhere. Most of it's going into the pipeline system to the east or the northeast. I think they're going to reverse one that's coming up from Louisiana eventually, and we'll be shipping it down there. As far as exporting it out of the United States, there's talk. There's only one. The only way you can export natural gas is if you liquefy it, which is freezing it and turns into liquid. There's talk of building some of those facilities around Baltimore, but the only facility that exists right now to even do that is in Alaska, and I don't think you even think it's up and running. So that's down the road, and each of those export facilities need to be permitted by the U.S. Department of Energy. They can't just build them and ship. They have to have permission from the Department of Energy, which is the entity that figures out whether we need it before they can send it overseas. Now, the one advantage of exporting overseas is they get more money for it. Here you get about $2.90 right now. In Asia, you could probably get $12. If the price stays too low here because there's so much gas, they'll stop producing. And that's just a market. That's the way business works. So if they can't make some money somewhere else, and they can only make $2 or $3 here, they'll stop producing. So we need them to get money somewhere. And the only place they're going to get that is, number one, if more domestic uses come on board, like trucks and cars and more power plants, or export overseas. But it takes about 4 or 5 years to build one of those liquefied plants. It's going to be a while before that's even an issue. But Pennsylvania exports it because we have more than we can use.
I'd like to direct my question to Martin. How widespread is the use of eminent domain throughout the Marcellus Shale?
Not being a lawyer, but my understanding is that eminent domain is only available to distribution companies that are putting in interstate pipelines regulated under FERC. I don't believe eminent domain is available to the gas companies for siting wells and putting in gathering lines. Only to the pipelines that are regulated under FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which are major transmission lines and regulated by PUC. So I think they have the power of eminent domain in certain cases, I believe. Gas companies putting in a well or putting in gathering lines and things like that, compressor stations and such, don't, as far as I know.
Yeah. Well, let me just make if I can go just maybe one step further and explain. There's 3 different types, essentially, of pipelines out there. I think people think all pipelines are the same. The reality is, actually, there's 3 different types. There is the gathering line, which is going from well to well to well to the compression station, from the compression station into the transmission line. And transmission lines are big lines, like there's one just not too far below town here that carries gas a great distance. That's usually an interstate line, like Marty is talking about. And then beyond that, you have the distribution line. That's the line that's coming off of that transmission line into a smaller line, and then it's distributed, it's bringing it to your house. So back to the eminent domain question, well, who has eminent domain in there? Public utilities have eminent domain. Or those large interstate lines have eminent domain, as Marty is saying, through FERC. But the gathering line, which are those lines that so much of that capacity is being built right now, they do not have eminent domain. So those companies actually have to negotiate that with the individual landowners. Now, sometimes they have the right to do that within a gas lease. Other times they don't, and they still have to go back and negotiate where that right-of-way would be. So again, some distinctions there.
Could you tell us a little bit more about this Shell, the ethane cracking plant? What's the big deal about it? Why is it such an important development?
Well, first of all, they cost $1 billion or $2 billion to build. So you can't spend $1 billion or $2 billion in an area of the state and not notice it in the economy. Secondly, and plus all the jobs and whatnot. But secondly, there are a lot of other industries that spring up around these cracker plants, pharmaceuticals, fertilizer companies, because that's their feedstock. What crackers get out of the gas is feedstock for a lot of other industry, plastics. So the idea is once you get one of these up, they all want to be close to it to save shipping costs. So you'll start to see other kinds of industries popping up all around it. Particularly, I didn't know if natural gas and fertilizer are like this. Yeah, you have to have natural gas to make fertilizer, and a lot of I think it's pentane is used in a lot of pharmaceuticals, pills. So you got the initial shot of spending all that money to build it, the jobs constructing it, the jobs operating it, but more importantly, the surrounding industries that will pop up around it. Not, not yet. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned in my presentation when I made my tour of all the meetings. Southwestern Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Eastern Ohio, there's been shallow gas wells down there for a long time. The people there were kind of used to what this was. This was all new, but they were used to it. You get up in Bradford and central Pennsylvania, Tioga, Lycoming, they thought the Martians landed. I mean, they've never seen anything like this. So that's where a lot of the noise started, and that's to your point. There's still some remnants up there, but the economy improvement up there is just overshadowing everything else. It's unbelievable.
It's not happening with this cracking.
No, that cracking plant needs the wet gas that Tom explained, and it has to have those other components in it.
But there's nothing happening yet, so to your point.
If I remember correctly from what you said, the casings of the mine, of the drill, were the problem where the contamination was occurring. Is that what I took from what you said? So is that true?
Well, yeah, if there is going to be a problem with the groundwater, it'll occur from the surface, a spill, truck turns over on the way to the well pad or something like that, or an improper casing where they drill through the water table. Now, one of the problems in Pennsylvania and Alaska are the only two states in the country that don't regulate private water wells. There's no regulation. You want to drill a water well in your backyard, go right ahead. You don't have to call anybody. The problem is there's holes all over the place where people would drill, not find water. They'd move down, drill somewhere else. They wouldn't plug it. There's no you don't have to plug it. So anything can be going down these holes all over the place. So it's really hard. In some instances, it's hard to say if there is pollution coming from, or contamination coming from. But there's been no cases of contamination from fracking, which I mentioned.
You're saying there's been no contamination from fracking ever in the state of Pennsylvania?
Ever. In the country.
In the country.
Drilling, yes.
I'm not buying that, I don't think.
Drilling and fracking are two different things.
I understand that. Yeah.
Fracking has...
I can go down. Fracking.
Right.
Right.
Fracking has... The water has never... that fracks the rock a mile down has never... There's no recorded incidents where that water has gotten back up into the... Now, in that packet I gave you... I mean, don't take my word.
Oh, I'm trying to learn, actually.
Okay, in the packet I gave you, we have front and back page of about 20. Now, these are people who get paid to do this stuff. They're engineers and...
well, the people that are being affected of it are also speaking up apparently. So
no, I understand, but it's the profession. These are career professionals.
But if you live on the land and it's not contaminated by water as a result of that,
No.
then that's another side to the story.
But but where it came from is that question.
All right, next question.
She had another question.
Bill, I want to follow up on that question. In your experience, knowing and working with the companies that are drilling, because it's very clear to me that it's probably drilling that's causing aquifer contamination problems.
Could be.
If it is reasonably shown that drilling activities were responsible for contaminating an aquifer, are the companies stepping up to the plate and doing the right thing by those affected parties?
Well, absolutely. By law, they have to. If you're within, 2,500 feet, they have to test your water before they drill and after they drill. And if it's contaminated or changed or whatever, they got to get you water. That's the law. Well, that's not out of the goodness of their heart. That's the law. Now, a lot of them depends on the company. The majors like Shell and Chevron and Exxon and Range and Rex Energy and Chesapeake, the larger companies they're testing out to almost 4,000 feet if there's a water well near there. They're going above and beyond the regulations. Look, they have investors to keep happy. They don't want to appear in the New York Times as killing somebody's cow or poisoning somebody's well. Because investors read that and say, well, I'm not spending any money with Exxon anymore. They're in trouble down there. So, I mean, and it's not like they don't have the money. The casing, a good example was that some of the early drillers, I forget the name of the company, was complaining DEP added another layer of casing in their regulations. And the driller was, and I was at a meeting, he was complaining. And later on, I asked one of the, it was a guy from Atlas or Chevron or one of those two. I said, does he have a point? He said, it's an extra $14,000 to put that extra layer on. If he can't afford $14,000, he shouldn't be in the drilling business. I mean, so, yes, are there bad actors? Are there weak actors? Sure, it can happen. But the regulations have really been strengthened on that casing part.
Thanks.
Hi. I wanted to ask Tom to clarify a point for everybody that I think his partner at Penn State taught me, who people worried about fracking contaminating 7,000 foot away aquifer water. And that is simply that the law of gravity doesn't cease to function when you drill a well and frack. The water is not going to come rising up through the rock to reach any aquifer. It's not possible. The law of gravity prevents it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Do you want?
Oh, a response. Go right ahead,
Comment
Tom.
back?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you're talking about Terry Engelder is who you're talking about. And anybody that watches this, anybody that's in academia, researchers that are following this very closely will tell you the law of physics, earth laws that come to pass or come to bear on this will maintain that water at that depth. So the likelihood of having water migrate or having a fluid, which is what it is at that point, migrate from depth with what we're talking about is highly unlikely, highly improbable. Now, it's highly improbable. It's not absolutely impossible. So we need to recognize through any part of this process, there's always a element of risk there. So you have to decide, well, is the element of risk worth taking? And what we're seeing is that hydraulic fracturing process, those fluids are not migrating back to surface. I think the point of clarification that's not being made in here, don't take that, just a moment. I gave you your chance for a minute, though. One of the things that I think we need to bring back into the discussion here is there's a couple places in that water as it's moving around, or the point that Bill is making about the fluids and about some of the other issues with water contamination. I think he's right on the mark, but I think we're missing something in there, and that's about methane migration. So we're talking about water and water contamination. We need to keep in mind that what most companies are finding, what DEP is finding, is methane migration issues. So that then comes back to the idea about the casing and the integrity of the engineering. I always talk about it as the integrity of the vessel. So often the conversation is about the concern about the chemicals, and I think we should be concerned about the chemicals, and regardless of what the source of the chemical is, and I often like to say, I don't care if it's Kool-Aid that's going down there. I have a spring. I live in this area. I don't want Kool-Aid coming back up in my water, and I don't think anybody here would either. Even though it might not be toxic, I don't want to take a shower in Kool-Aid. So humor aside, it comes down to the integrity, it comes down to the engineering, and that's the critical part here in this whole story as I would see it. So then take that a little further and go to what Katrina was saying about the rules and the regs. One thing that we need to recognize is there was clearly identified, as Bill was talking about, some companies had some issues with methane migration, and this I think is the biggest concern that people have, and maybe why it's worth spending just a couple more minutes if we could on this. So methane migration is an issue, and that was found in those wells. So then the grouting standards, the casing standards were changed as of about this time, roughly this time last year. It was in the beginning of February last year, and it's because of methane issues. So that took a lot of the methane issues off the table. So what's left there when you're thinking about water contamination issues? Well, if it's not fluids coming from depth, if it's not methane migration issues, and there were some of those, and there's still some of those, but they're greatly reduced to what they were, then you're talking about surface spillage. You're talking, and Bill had mentioned that as well. What companies are doing, two different things that I think are key here. Best management practices are using impermeable pad covers on the surface, and they're bermed and diked around the side. So if there is some kind of a leak, And when they're operating and drilling or fracking, whatever the process they're working on at that time, any chemicals, any fluids, it doesn't have to be a chemical, it could be hydraulic fluid or diesel fuel or whatever. If it's spilled on top of that, that bermed barrier, which is a poly-type liner, and typically then they operate on top of a poly deck on top of the liner. So they can vacuum that up and they can dispose of it properly. The last thing, and Bill touched on it just briefly there, but I think it's a point to go just one step further with, and that's the idea about impoundments. Now, if you went back just a couple years ago, and we had one right next to our house, there was a company that had done some drilling, and they did an impoundment with the drill cuttings and some of the drilling muds and fluids that were being used. Now companies, not every company, but most companies are not doing that. They're using a closed loop. So whether it's during the drilling side and collecting the fluids and the muds and the chemicals that are being used, or whether it's during the hydraulic flowback time frame, those fluids are collected in tanks. They do not go into a pit anymore, except for the fresh fluids that I think Marty was talking about, the water, fresh water being in the front end, not coming in the back end of this, captured and then either recycled or disposed of properly. So a lot of the risk that was in the picture in the past is now being taken off the table, and it's due to the things that Katrina was talking about. It's the change and the evolution of the rules and the regs out there. The last point that I think is most important to make here is we always need to keep in mind that this is a rapidly evolving story and technology that's being applied. So if you look at it and you read something on the internet about what it was, that's probably not what it is. You have to keep moving along with the story and where the story is moving to. And where it is right now will be different than where it will be 6 months from now. So I think a couple real key points. Thanks.
Okay.
Real quickly on
sorry.
that, this is the American Petroleum Institute's standards and practices for hydraulic fracking. There must be 200 pages here, and they're constantly being updated and fed out to their individual company members. DEP's inspectors are trained by APA professors. They are the standard of not just the United States, but the accepted standard of the world, of world governments on testing and whatever. So this is not your father's gas well.
Katrina, you had a comment?
Is what I've seen first. I didn't know going in, but after a year of a lot of this, I'm convinced.
Go ahead. Last word.
All right, well, maybe. Okay, just to tie it back into what the other gentleman said, are they being held accountable? Yes. When we talk about methane migration, the case most people are familiar with is endemic Pennsylvania. That's where methane got into water. It was in the movie Gasland. What did happen was the DEP determined that the company was responsible. They offered to put in new water filtration systems for anyone who wanted it. Some families went to court. It ended up settling. Cabot put in an escrow fund. It was several $billion. Each family got twice the value of their house from Cabot as damages. The company also delivered water to their house until they put in a new water filtration system. And then the DEP came in and said that their water was clean. So these companies are being held responsible, and people have the option then with twice the value of their home if they didn't want to be in that area. But they're choosing to be because it was methane. It wasn't a dangerous chemical, but it was being treated. And I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Marge. No, I'm really sorry, but they are going to kick us out of here. We've got to clean up all of this electronic equipment. Folks, I appreciate anybody who raises their voice about an issue on any side. This is my friend Marge from down the street. She does have a petition against fracking to I guess, make it illegal. And it will be, okay, just, you can talk to her about it. I'm sorry, Marge, I can't give you any more time. But folks, her petition is in the back. I'm sure this has been a lot of information for you. This has been videoed, and it will be available on WKTP.TV. So if you want to go back over it, there's a lot of information in a short period of time. WKTP.TV. And if you're on our email list, we will send you that link. Also, our next meeting is March 12th. We are going to be on the topic of health care and Obamacare and where that has brought us to this point. So please join us. Thank you so much for coming. A hand for our speakers, folks. These folks came without any speaker's fee. They came from Pittsburgh, from Central PA, and at no charge to us. By the way, if you can help with a donation for traveling costs, that basket is on the back table there. We would appreciate that.